Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Faith and Family First. I am your host, Eva Andrade. I'm here once again with my co-host, Marcus Oshiro, and we're going to talk about a couple of things today. When you are listening to this, it should be the primary election day, but you may be listening to it after the fact or right before the fact. So we're going to have some reminders there. We're going to examine two extraordinary developments hanging over this election. Number one, the indictment of Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke, and a judge's ruling that Honolulu City Council Chair Tommy Waters is ineligible to seek another term, even though his name is already on the ballot. And we do have a listener comment that Marcus and I are going to talk about, so stay tuned for that. Welcome to the show today, Marcus.
All right. Good to be here, Eva.
As always, it's a pleasure, Marcus. And we're getting excited because the time is ticking away. And right now, if you're listening to this and it's before the election, it's probably too late for you to mail in your ballot. So that means if you have your ballot and you have not turned it in, you need to get your happy body over to one of the drop boxes.
I think that's Kapolei or Honolulu City Hale.
And if you're listening on the neighbor islands, then you also have some places that you can drop it off. But get it in. Do not wait. Do not delay. You can also go in and vote in person if you bring your ballot, correct?
Yes.
So make sure that's the whole point of the reminders. Get out and vote, please, please. Hawaii is always very low on the
This is good. I think it's going to be a low turnout again this year, non-presidential year, but it's going to be a squeaker in several races, both House, county, and mayoral. It's going to be close.
Which contests, Marcus, do you think might significantly change the direction of the Hawaii government, or maybe not at all?
Well, I think the Lieutenant Governor's race is going to be very interesting. I think the race in play right now with Congressional District 1 with Keokalole and Case is also interesting. And of course, we're going to talk more in detail about the City Council race between the current Council Chair, Tommy Waters, and challenger Trevor Ozawa.
Okay, so with what's happening right now, we're going to get into this with the situation that's happening with Sylvia Luke. Do you think the frustration over political scandals is going to reduce the turnout, or do you think it's going to have the opposite effect and actually motivate voters to get to the polls?
I think it's going to motivate people to turn out, and that this is so beyond the pale of anything could ever imagine. A once in a political lifetime, so to speak, event when you have so much on the front page regarding now formal criminal charges being brought to the Lieutenant Governor, State of Hawaii, to a deputy director of transportation, a former director of human services, staff member to the Ways and Means Committee, chaired by Senator De La Cruz. And then you have this other guy who's left the state of Hawaii and hiding out in the Philippines. This is something that I don't recall ever seeing in my lifetime. And it's just about to start.
This is huge because Luke faces allegations including conspiracy to commit bribery, falsifying candidate committee reports. Now, of course, these are all allegations, right? And she's presumed innocent until she's proven guilty. And she's been on leave since April. Governor Josh Green had suggested that she step down, and because of everything that was happening, right? She did.
Well, I think back in April, she decided to place herself on leave without pay, and then the governor thought it best to then bring in the comptroller, who was Keith Reagan, to serve in the interim as lieutenant governor. Again, because the Senate President Kochi was not interested, the House Speaker was not interested, the Attorney General was not interested. So they went through the list, the hierarchy of replacements. And that's why Keith Reagan today is acting Lieutenant Governor.
Now, what do the indictments allege and what does it not establish?
Well, it doesn't establish any finding that anyone is guilty. And again, there is a presumption of innocence unless proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's the burden of the prosecuting attorney in this case to prove their case either before a judge or a jury. And in fact, their not guilty pleas have already been entered into the court. I think last week, Thursday, they all appeared, represented by their attorneys, and entered a not guilty plea. At the same time, in this arraignment and plea, the court did set a trial date pretty quick, September 28th, 2026. That's a pretty quick turnaround.
We're going to stay on top of that for sure. Now, back in the days of I Love Lucy, Ricky Ricardo used to say, "Lucy, you got some splaining to do." So, do you think the voters believe that the governor has some splaining to do?
I think he does. Well, that's one thing that I think even, what's his name, David Shapiro raised up last Sunday's paper. And I think I was similarly thinking about how would the governor be able to say, I'm not involved in this, I don't know anything about the ongoing investigation, yet at the same time tell the whole world and tell the media that I think something big is coming, something big is coming, something big is coming. I don't know the details, but something big is coming. And it comes out on the front page of the newspaper. So I think that's a little bit weird, about being, half pregnant or not wet, but not dry. You know what I mean?
Well, that is hilarious. Okay, now let's talk some brass tacks here. She was the finance chair. So she had a lot of responsibility for checking out what was happening at the Capitol, looking at contracts, talking to committees. You were a finance chair. So explain to the listeners, what could she have done different? What would you have done different? I mean, this is serious, Marcus.
Okay, so let's first start off again, and I'm going to repeat it. This is just allegations. Nothing has been proven. She's innocent to proven guilty. But I can state that I did serve as the finance chair for 6 years. I served during the time when Governor Lingo was the governor, and I also served for a time when Neil Abercrombie was the governor. So I served under both Republican and a Democrat governor. It is a position of much responsibility and much authority because you touch upon almost every single piece of legislation of a fiscal import, but also with the entire operating budgets of the states and the departments. So therein, you have some say on certain appropriations and how the departments might spend it, even for certain private contracts that arose in this case, during the COVID-19 period of time when the Department of Health, through the Governor's Office, asked for an emergency appropriation of additional monies to front load the contracting of services for testing, and then later to seek reimbursement from the federal government through FEMA. But that is definitely a role and responsibility of the Finance Committee, the Finance Chair.
So there's obviously an investigation happening right now. It's a criminal investigation. So do you think that the legislature should also now conduct its own investigation, or would that interfere with the criminal investigation?
I think that the desire of the legislature was to have the Attorney General do an impartial, fair, complete investigation. I think that has been done. And I think Attorney General Lopez has then, taking that to the grand jury, and then the grand jury returning a true bill of indictment, hence the current complaint, criminal charges against these 5 defendants. So I think they've achieved that. Now, whether or not the legislature wants to examine or look at different other processes or procedures or laws that they can enact to curb this kind of practice or maybe dissuade people from this kind of practice, that's up to them. That's their prerogative. That's their responsibility. I recently heard that someone was asking for a special session. I don't think that's going to be coming, so I wouldn't hold my breath for a special session. But I want to give a shout out to this one Republican member. She's in the minority party. Remember that now. She's a relatively new Republican member. I think her name is Kanani Souza. But she is demonstrating how a single legislator can use the platform and forum that she has as a legislator to raise this issue about, can we change, Can we look at different laws or rules or processes to avoid this going forward? And she says, hey, what about a special session? Let's do it right now. Let's go and close off any possible undue influence by contractors, and maybe their families or their shareholders or their partners. But she is getting a lot of media. And this is where she's using her office and her title and her position to generate that kind of activity. And I bet she's getting a lot of favorable feedback from the public.
That's really good. In fact, it kind of ties into the next question, because there is a process in Hawaii where you have to do your disclosures. So, you've been through that process. You know how to do all that with the campaign spending and all that. So is there, do you believe there is some corrections that need to take place in the processes today?
I think there always can be changes to be made, incremental or otherwise. I think one of the things I'm looking at right now is with contractors, people who have contracts with state government, county or state, or maybe even federal government. Are there going to be certain limitations on whether or not they can make donations and they can contribute to a candidate or an organization like a candidates committee? I can see that. I think even the former Justice Foley came out on his good government committee saying that we need to go and close off this so-called quote unquote loophole regarding campaign donations from contractors. The problem that they're going to run into is that how do you define that? Who is a shareholder, a stockholder, or a partner? Do you extend it to the families? And then, of course, always behind this, especially since the United States Supreme Court's recent rulings regarding the First Amendment, free speech, how much restraint, how much restrictions can you impose upon individuals and or the collective, in these instances? We go back to Citizens United, right? The collective voice of individuals organizing as a not-for-profit. Shouldn't they have a voice? So I guess it's not as simple as it may appear to be. So again, my punchline is this. I don't think they're going into a special session. I wouldn't hold my breath for it, because you need to have agreement between the House and Senate before they go in. And if the governor doesn't call them in, they will need to have a supermajority in both the House and Senate. And the supermajority in the Senate is 17 of the 25, and in the House, 34 of the 50 members.
Yeah, can we say snowball?
Snowball in Bell.
Okay, so we're talking about campaign donations, right? But there's also another thing that's important to look at is Cynthia Luke has made some endorsements. Now, is those endorsements that she's made on people, do you think that's going to hurt the people she's endorsed?
You mean Sylvia Luke?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. It's similar to the endorsements that are being circulated right now with Donald Trump, right? President Trump. He's going to certain states, stumping for some of the Republican senators and Congress members, and they're kind of telling him, thank you, Donald. Thank you, Mr. President. But no, we'll pass this time, right? Yeah. So, yeah, there is an effect upon who you associate with, and, birds of a feather flock together. So you need to be careful of that.
Okay, so let's shift to the race to become the next lieutenant governor, right? So her withdrawal, it's transforming what would have been a routine incumbent race into one of the primary's most consequential races, right? I mean, who would have thunk? Right. I mean, obviously.
I didn't.
You did. Well, I don't think most people were prepared.
No. You have to be clairvoyant. You have to be Nostradamus.
Yeah. So now, do you think the race for lieutenant governor is now a referendum on the political culture that produced the scandal?
Well, I know that she's not on the ballot. So if she was on the ballot, there might be some kind of litmus test of turnout and support and support. But she's not on the ballot. But I think the opportunity is now between the two major candidates in the primary, as far as the Democrats are concerned, is going to be, Kawakami and Bellotti. And I think, she's making her case that she's the progressive, she's a change candidate, she's a good government candidate, she's the public financing candidate. She's, that's her distinguishing features of her campaign. However, she is not as well known as Derek Kawakami. She has no executive branch serving as mayor for 8 years. She hasn't gone through landslides, floods and fires and COVID-19 as the CEO of county government. So that's where Derek is ahead, and Derek is getting a lot of support from some interesting friends. Sometimes we don't choose all of our friends; they become our friends, and he's having that right now. It's a double-edged sword because they get his name out, but yet some people don't care for
Well, that was what I was going to ask, because, here you have this situation and people may be questioning how Governor Green handled it. And there may be people saying that he needs to do more because of what happened. So now people could be asking, Marcus, when they're looking at their candidates for lieutenant governor, should they pull a Democratic ticket? Their question may be, is this person going to challenge Governor Green? Or is this person going to work with him nicely? And maybe people don't want someone who's going to work nicely.
I think they want a governor, lieutenant governor to work together as a team. But that doesn't mean that, like me and my wife, we got married. We're married, happily married. We are, right, honey? Yeah, we're happily married. But, we don't always agree on what we're going to eat tonight, right? We don't always agree upon, you want, Mazethra cheese, or you want, cheese, macaroni and cheese and meatballs, right? We don't always have agreement. Go dong yang or go to all yang vegetable, right? We don't have any always agreement. So that's the same case with the lieutenant governor and governor. I think for the most part, the lieutenant governor will support most of the governor's policies, but that doesn't mean they're going to be walking lockstep. And I don't think that's appropriate. But they should have a respect for each other, and I think some way of working to each other, especially when you have a governor, if he who might be facing his last term or a shorter term.
That's what I would say. I would say that it's the beauty of the and in that. So I'm answering my own question, that I would want someone who definitely can work with the governor, because you don't want someone who wouldn't work with the governor. No, that would be not good. Yeah. But you also want someone who is strong enough to question and maybe, help steer situations that could be pretty deep.
Yeah, if I was the governor, I would want to have a lieutenant governor that would work with me, assist me, help me bring forward my platform, my vision that the people elected me for, but at the same time understand and get involved in it, because my thinking would be, you might be an appropriate successor, and I want to make sure that the policies and the programs that we start, it's going to be followed through, it's going to be carried through, because many of these initiatives will not be done in 4 years, 8 years. It may be spread out over a longer period of time. So you want to have that good relationship with your partner, whoever he or she might be. And it's not over until it's over, because we go to the primary, we still have the general, and there are 2 or 3 Republican candidates, that are going to be facing off with Governor Green, and whoever wins.
That's why the primary is so important, Marcus, because there are going to be some races like the Souza Medeiros race that's going to be decided in the primary. So we understand some, but there's going to be some big races that are going to happen in the general. And like you mentioned, the governor is going to be one of those, because then we will know for sure who the governor candidate is, the lieutenant governor candidate on both parties.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to be Bulaye.
Hey, we could be related. No pick on him.
No. I mean, he did pretty good against Cayetano way back when, but I think but also the mayor's race on Hawai, right? You got our friends over there.
The Portuguese, the race of the Portuguese.
Oh yeah,
the Portuguese.
You got the market, yeah. So you got Mr. Carvalho, Mayor Carvalho. So
right? Even though we don't support Kalshi, go check it out right now and see what the battle of the Portuguese.
Oh yeah. There's also Chairman Raposa. So two fucking local Portuguese boys from Kauai. You know what I mean?
I tell you.
And then you got the Maui situation too, right? Where you have Mayor Bud Bisson running for his first re-election as an incumbent, and he's being challenged by a strong activist, longtime member in the community, council chair Yukile Sugimura, right? So that's interesting there also.
We're going to have a special guest after the election to actually do some evaluation of these races, and we're gonna have fun with that one. So that's good. All right, let's start to shift. So when we started reminding people about voter election and all of that, I made the comment that I would love to hear from our viewers if they had any issues with the office of election. And I did get a very interesting text. And here was the text I got from a listener. And he wanted us to talk about it on the show. So here's what he said. I submitted a change of address for voting when I moved on May 1st. I already received the voter registration card in April at my old address. I had been looking for my ballot, but the change of address that I submitted was never processed. I went online to request a new ballot at my correct current address. The website is very finicky. For example, Everything must be typed in manually, not auto-filled or cut and pasted. And even though the website allows both, but then you cannot submit it. An example of something that results in easy mistakes. The very first step is your name, last name, then first name on next line. It is not a natural order. So I thought that was interesting because, you've got a lot of our elderly kupuna who may be trying to do this online. My mother has gone through the most obnoxious process just to get a state ID because she's not going to drive anymore. And my poor 88-year-old mother trying to navigate filling out these online forms was a nightmare. So this person is not elderly and is a pretty smart individual. And for them to complain that it was not an easy process, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I share that person's lack of technological skill, ability to follow these. I find it equally frustrating. I think I miss those days of just walking in or filling up a form and submitting it. But this is this is the day and age we live in, right? Without a connectivity with our government is through the internet and these forms and but it's very important that it's accurate in your name, your current register, maybe your prior registration number, your address. These are all very important. So it has to be accurate to the T. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Name, rank, sigma, accurate to the T. I don't know if they ask for social security numbers or driver's license numbers, but it has to be accurate. So that's one of the things. But again, if anyone has any complaints, there is a commission that the state of Hawaii has called the State of Hawaii Elections Commission.
Oh no, you just opened up a can of worms. So many listeners have you been watching the hearings that have been going on? Nobody has, well, I wouldn't say nobody, that's a horrible thing. There's a lot of people that have lost faith and trust in the Elections Commission.
Well, the Election Commission is statutorily set up to be the watchdog of the state elections, and that means oversight of the Office of Elections, which includes, I believe, Mr. Nago and maybe Mr. Cadilla also, who's also there. So if there's any complaints, they're the bodies that would feel that maybe you also would CC your elected officials, state senator, legislator, governor, etc. But that's the agency, that's the commission that we have established by law. They have the responsibility to field and investigate anything. So that's very important. I think the recent story with Tommy Waters right now, people are so affected by it, and maybe a little. Oh, they're upset. Okay, they're upset.
Yeah.
So they're concerned. Those who cast their votes, who didn't, the other two candidates waiting on the sideline, what's going to happen. Both candidates are concerned about it. But at some point in time, it went through a review by the State of Hawaii Elections Office. Mm-hmm. So somehow they made a decision saying, Chairman Waters, you can't remain on the ballot. We know what the law says, but we believe this. And then, they went through the process, right? So then Judge Ashford comes in. He's a reasonable type of judge. He reads his stuff. He reads the law. He reads the briefs. Okay, he came up with decisions. No, the law is clear. The ordinance is clear. 2 consecutive terms. That's it. You serve 2 consecutive terms. You're no longer eligible. You cannot be elected. So now it's a quagmire. And again,
it is because people have already voted. His name is on the ballot. Some people have cast their vote already, and so the questions are, what's going to happen to my vote?
It's anyone's guess, Eva.
Yeah, so I think that's what people are,
Yeah, it's messed up.
So do you think candidates should be required to secure an eligibility determination before ballots are printed?
I bet you there's 76 legislators right now thinking about the very same thing. You're so present because they're thinking about that. What should have been done? Was there any kind of verification that should have been done? Any questions that should have been done?
Well, isn't this the same discussion in a sense that we're having about voters? Voters have to be eligible to vote, whether they're a resident, they're the right age. Right. So it seems to me a simple thing to make sure that before your name is on the ballot that you've been deemed eligible.
And I think Chairman Waters did. I think he went through the process. Said, "Hey, you guys know my situation. I came into a special election in 2018 against Trevor Ozawa, but I want to make sure that in 2026, as I run, I'm going to be cleared." And I think he also got some counsel or maybe some declaratory ruling or some kind of legal acknowledgement that several years ago, he is eligible in 2026 to run again.
That's actually a good point. So people can understand the process. Was this a final ruling, or is there another ruling that?
Oh, this is like most cases that you're going to have a right to appeal, and so Tommy Waters and anybody of the other parties have a right to appeal the decision. There's still,
and Tommy is right. My understanding is he is appealing.
Well, I think as you sit here today, Thursday, on what is today, the 30th. I don't think the formal written opinion and order has been issued by Judge Ashford right now. But once they get that, they're going to look through that and see the basis for an appeal. It seems more likely than not that Tommy will file an appeal. The question is whether or not the appellate courts, either the ICA or the Hawaii Supreme Court, can take that case, review it, and then render a decision. But again, it messes the situation up.
Really
so what I think is floating out there is maybe have a special election.
If we have so much to talk about, and we only have a couple of minutes left. So I'm curious. So now looking at all this, looking forward to the next legislature, right? And the governor, right? Will the incoming legislature treat ethics reform as a first session priority, or will the issue fade after Election Day?
It's not going to fade. This is going to be, along with cost of living, along with housing, along with transportation, along with education, along with healthcare. These are the big five out there. There's also going to be the issue of good government. There's going to be the issue of ethics. There's going to be the issue of campaign finance reform. And I'm sure that whole contractor issue, regulation or prohibition or restriction, is going to come back front and center. And I think this is where both parties and activists, all 76 of them, will have a great time. Also with the governor, Lieutenant Governor, before...
Which Marcus will solidify the point we've made every week since this election season started, is you got to make sure you know who you're voting for, because once they're in that Capitol building, decisions are going to be made, conversations are going to be had, debates are going to happen, and you want the right people in the middle of those debates.
And please hold on to those brochures, those flyers that you collect. Collect them, put them aside, because they're going to become useful when you go and sit down with your elected official post the election. Say, hey, you sent me this brochure, you said this on it. Okay, I want to talk to you about what you're doing now. So hold on to those brochures, hold on to those flyers, use them as your tool when you meet with them as a constituent.
Amen.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question. Marcus Oshiro, have you voted already?
I have.
Ask me.
Have you voted already, Eva Andrade?
Absolutely. And mine's, it was in the mail like third day after I received it. I don't think I held it longer than 3 days, because I kind of already, because of the voter guide and all that, I already knew where I was.
Yeah, I had to go and think about some of the OHA seats that are up. So that took me a couple of days of doing some research, some reading, and then talking to some friends. But I got it in the first week.
Yep. All right, so today's election is going to choose nominees, but it's also going to measure how Hawaii voters respond when questions of power, eligibility, and public trust collide. Completed ballots must be received, not merely postmarked, by 7 p.m. on Saturday, August 8th. Make sure you follow all official instructions and use an authorized place of deposit or voter service center. Then join us as the results begin to define the November election and Hawaii's next chapter. And I look forward to sharing that with you, Marcus, and we will be with all of you next week. Mahalo, everybody.
No vote, don't grumble.